The atmosphere inside the Jimmy Kimmel live studio that fateful evening was electric, with an almost palpable tension, as if the very air molecules were vibrating with anticipation. The audience, a carefully curated mix of starstruck tourists, jaded industry insiders, and eager social media influencers, fidgeted in their seats, their smartphones clutched like talismans against missing what might become television history. The stage, usually a brightly lit playground for celebrity banter and viral stunts, took on an almost reverential quality under the harsh studio lights, the polished floor reflecting the nervous energy of the crew making last-minute adjustments. Every camera angle was checked and rechecked, every microphone tested with unusual intensity, the technical team moving with the precision of surgeons preparing for a delicate operation. This wasn't just another late-night talk show taping. This was the return of Clint Eastwood, the last living embodiment of Hollywood's golden age, a man whose very presence demanded respect, and whose legendary career had spanned the evolution of cinema itself. When the announcer finally boomed Eastwood's name, the studio didn't erupt in its typical raucous applause, but rather fell into a hushed, almost sacred silence. The audience collectively held their breath as the 94-year-old icon emerged from the wings, his tall, lean frame moving with the deliberate, measured gait of a man who had spent a lifetime commanding attention without ever needing to raise his voice. Dressed in his signature understated style, a well-worn blazer over a simple collared shirt, his silver hair swept back like a lion's mane, Eastwood carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing left to prove. His face, a roadmap of wrinkles etched by decades of squinting into both literal and metaphorical suns, remained impassive as he surveyed the studio, his piercing blue eyes missing nothing. The contrast between Eastwood and the gleaming, hyper-produced set of Jimmy Kimmel Live couldn't have been more stark. It was as if a grizzled gunslinger had wandered onto the set of a futuristic game show. Jimmy Kimmel, usually the picture of relaxed confidence with his perfectly tailored suits and practiced smile, stood to greet his guest with what long-time viewers might have recognized as uncharacteristic hesitation. As they shook hands, Eastwood's grip famously firm, Kimmel's noticeably tentative, the power dynamic was established before a single word had been spoken. The audience's applause, when it finally came, wasn't the usual perfunctory celebrity, welcome, but something deeper, more reverential, as if they were bearing witness to something momentous. Seasoned talk show viewers could sense it immediately. This wouldn't be the standard promotional interview filled with rehearsed anecdotes and mutual back-patting. There was electricity in the air, the kind that precedes either magic or disaster, and no one, least of all Kimmel himself, knew which it would be. The interview began innocuously enough, with Kimmel employing his standard opening gambit. Clint, at 94 years young, most people are enjoying retirement. What keeps you coming? Back to filmmaking? The question was delivered with Kimmel's trademark charm, his eyebrows arched in playful expectation of the kind of self-deprecating quip that typically kicks off these conversations. But Eastwood, settling into his chair with the deliberate movements of a man who takes his time with everything, let the question hang in the air just a beat too long, his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice, that iconic, gravelly baritone that had narrated generations of American cinema, cut through the studio like a knife through butter. Stories worth telling. 4 simple words, delivered with such weight and finality that they seemed to suck all the oxygen out of the room. The audience, conditioned to laugh at even the mildest witticism, instead sat in stunned silence, unsure how to react to such unvarnished sincerity on a show built on artifice. Kimmel, the consummate professional, blinked rapidly as his well-honed comedic reflexes momentarily failed him. You could practically see the gears turning behind his eyes as he recalibrated his approach, his smile tightening at the corners as he shifted in his seat. "Well, that's certainly true of your new film," he offered, grasping for safer ground. A Sharp Tale of Justice has that classic Eastwood intensity, a man standing up against a corrupt system. It's the kind of movie Hollywood doesn't make much anymore, is it? The question was clearly meant as both compliment and conversation starter, but Eastwood's response would turn it into something far more significant. The old cowboy leaned forward, slightly, his elbows resting on his knees, his gaze locking onto Kimmel with an intensity that made the younger man visibly swallow. "No," Eastwood said, the single syllable carrying the weight of a manifesto. "Because Hollywood stopped caring about truth a long time ago." The audience reaction was immediate and visceral, a collective gasp followed by scattered, nervous applause. Some viewers looked around uncertainly, as if checking whether they were allowed to agree with such a blunt indictment of the industry that employed most of them. Others nodded vigorously, their faces lighting up with the thrill of hearing someone finally say what they'd long thought. Kimmel, his carefully constructed facade of easygoing charm beginning to crack, attempted to steer the conversation back to safer waters. "Now, Clint, your Dirty Harry films were both critical darlings and box office smashes. That's a rare combination today." His tone was light, conversational, but there was a new tightness in his shoulders, a slight tremor in his hands as he shuffled his cue cards. Eastwood didn't just reject the olive branch, he set it on fire. "You keep talking about money," he rumbled, his voice dropping to a near whisper that somehow carried even more power than if he'd shouted. "That film wasn't about box office. It was about a man doing what was right when the system failed." He paused, letting the words sink in, his steely gaze never leaving Kimmel's increasingly pale face. "You ever think about that when you're out here making jokes for ratings?" The silence that followed was deafening. The studio audience sat frozen, their phones forgotten in their laps, their eyes darting between the two men like spectators at a high-stakes poker game. Kimmel's mouth opened and closed several times, his usual arsenal of witty comebacks failing him completely. The cameras, always rolling, captured every excruciating second. The way Kimmel's fingers clenched and unclenched around his pen, the sheen of sweat suddenly visible on his forehead under the harsh studio lights, the barely perceptible shake of his head as he realized he had no response that wouldn't make the situation worse. After what felt like an eternity but was probably no more than 10 seconds, Kimmel muttered something about needing to take a break and stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Without another word, without even looking at Eastwood, he turned and walked off stage, leaving the legendary actor sitting alone under the lights, the very picture of calm amid the growing storm. The aftermath was immediate and explosive. Social media platforms erupted within minutes, with Zara Eastwood vs. Kimmel trending worldwide before the show had even finished airing. Clips of the confrontation went viral across every platform, each frame analyzed and debated by millions. Conservative. Commentators hailed Eastwood as a truth-teller standing against Hollywood's liberal elite, while progressive voices accused him of being an out-of-touch relic. Industry insiders whispered about the incident at every power lunch and cocktail party, some applauding Eastwood's candor, others condemning what they saw as an unfair attack on one of late night's most beloved hosts. Kimmel's team went into full damage control mode, releasing carefully worded statements about unexpected creative differences and respectful disagreements. But the damage was done. The ratings for that night's episode shattered records, though not in the way Kimmel might have hoped. People weren't tuning in to laugh, but to witness what many were calling the moment Hollywood's facade cracked. In the days that followed, the incident became more than just another celebrity feud. It morphed into a cultural flashpoint, a Rorschach test for how people felt about the entertainment industry, about authenticity versus performance, about the very nature of truth in an age of manufactured content. Pundits wrote think pieces analyzing every second of the confrontation. Psychologists weighed in on the power dynamics at play, and even politicians referenced the incident in speeches about media integrity. Meanwhile, Eastwood, true to form, gave no interviews, offered no explanations. He simply returned to work on his next project, letting his words and that unforgettable moment of television speak for themselves. The legend had walked onto that stage with nothing to prove and everything to say, and in doing so, had exposed The uncomfortable truth that sometimes the most powerful statement is simply refusing to play the game. So now we turn to you, the audience. In an entertainment landscape increasingly dominated by algorithms, viral moments, and carefully curated personas, was Eastwood's brutal honesty a much-needed wake-up call, or merely the last stand of a man out of time? Did he expose an industry that's lost its way, or simply fail to adapt to its evolution? The conversation continues in the comments below. Share your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe for more unfiltered looks at the moments that define our culture. Because in Hollywood, as in life, the truth may be rare, but when it appears, it's impossible to ignore.